A mother of two is discovered dead inside her home. Authorities would arrest a man they believe committed the horrific murder, but they soon discovered in their investigation he's done something like it before. On August 12th, 38-year-old Victoria Gamble was found dead inside her home in Sauk Rapids, Minnesota. Investigators learned the day prior to her body being discovered, she met a man at a local bar. Security footage from the bar showed Gamble talking with a man named Christopher Neal, and the two were spotted leaving together around 1 a.m. The two headed back to Gamble's apartment where he committed the unthinkable. Neal allegedly strangled the mother of two to death and then took off with her car. Around 3 a.m., Neal was reportedly seen on security footage leaving the apartment alone. Police say Neal tried to cover up by avoiding the security cameras. Police say he turned his head after spotting the cameras and tried to hide his face as he left Victoria's apartment building. When police responded to her home, her black Chevy Equinox was missing from the parking lot, and that wasn't all that was taken. When police searched her apartment, her car keys, apartment key fob, and other items were reportedly missing. When authorities caught up to Neal, he was no longer in Minnesota. Instead, he was states away in Louisiana at a hotel with Victoria's car, and he was ultimately arrested. Neal reportedly admitted to investigators he was in a woman's apartment in Sauk Rapids, but he couldn't remember her name. He also claimed he had limited memory of what happened inside the apartment and told authorities he didn't believe he killed her and allegedly thought she was still alive when he left her apartment. However, he copped to taking her keys from the counter when he left, but a forensic analysis would offer up more clues connecting the crime to Neal. According to the medical examiner, they determined Victoria was murdered by strangulation. Swabs of Victoria's neck reportedly contained DNA from two male individuals, and Neal's DNA matched the major male DNA profile. Prosecutors charged Neal with second-degree murder, but he's being held in jail on charges relating to a completely separate case. This is a horrific and disturbing case, but it's important to share. And part of the reason we're able to keep bringing you these stories is because of our great sponsors. And I want to quickly talk about one of our amazing sponsors, and that's Odoo. I'm sure a lot of you watching this might be business owners or thinking about starting a side hustle. Well, Odoo can help. Odoo is a free all-in-one business management software with tools to help you run your business. I mean, look, I'm a cat mom and I want my cat to get some brand deals. Using Odoo's website builder, I built a site for my cat Buttons in just minutes, thanks to easy tools like AI copywriting and drag and drop features. 5 minutes later and boom, check it out. I now have buttonsthecat.odoo.com. So I want to thank Odoo for sponsoring our videos. And for our amazing viewers, you can start building your site now and get a free domain for the first year with our link, odoo.com/lcnews2. Again, that's odoo.com/lcnews2 to try Odoo now for free. According to court documents, Neal was charged with domestic assault strangulation on August 1st, more than a week before he met Victoria, and he was released on bail. On August 12th, the day Victoria was discovered dead, the Aitkin County Sheriff's Office reported a violation of domestic abuse no contact order that was put in place between him and the victim of that assault. A warrant was issued for his arrest, and he was formally charged for the violation on the 19th of August. Neal's horrific alleged actions have left Victoria's family picking up the pieces, as now her two children are left without a mother. And a post to GoFundMe would share more insight into who Victoria was as a person. According to her loved ones, Victoria was an extremely proud mom of two boys. She loved her boys with all her heart and soul, and they were the center of her world. She always had a bubbly attitude and had far too much trust in people. The post went on to say, quote, on August 12th, she trusted the wrong person. She met a man after hearing he was from her hometown. He took advantage of her interest and manipulated her into trusting him, using their hometown connection as a way to do so. As the night was ending, she grew to trust this man who offered to drive her home, and she accepted. Victoria's loved ones then shared why they believed the justice system failed her. They wrote, quote, Victoria always saw the good in everyone, and being from the same hometown, that was enough for her to trust him and the situation. She didn't know he got out on bail on August 3rd of 2024 after being charged on August 1st of 2024 for violent crime of domestic violence/strangulation. This man took his violence to the next level when he strangled Victoria to death on August 12th of 2024 after dropping her off at home, all within the hour of arriving home and just the day before her 39th birthday, leaving two young boys behind and the fathers to pick up the pieces. Our justice system failed Victoria, and because of that, she lost her life brutally. Victoria's boys are who will forever be hurt by this preventable crime. At this time, Christopher Neal remains behind bars in the Aitkin County Jail on his previous charges, but he'll soon have to answer to his murder charges in Benton County as well. This case is just so upsetting. So let's bring on now attorney Dina Sayek to break down this case even further. Dina, it's so great to see you. What's your reaction to this case? It truly is like a nightmare. You meet someone at a bar, you go back home with them, and that person allegedly murders you in your own home. What is your reaction to all of this?
Well, I think you put it perfectly. Definitely a nightmare, very tragic. And I think just a reminder of why it's so important to take domestic violence cases and violence against women very seriously. Because in this case, as in many cases where there is violence against women, it is often not the first time somebody has committed some sort of violent act against women. And we see lesser sentences for people who commit violence against women, including rape, and often repeat offenders. And I think that's an example of this too, of how seriously that type of violence should be taken.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point, especially because strangulation is such a personal crime. However, from what we know, Victoria Gamble and Christopher Neal only met that night and then he allegedly killed her. And then we learned that he has done this before in another case. What do you make of just that pattern that we're seeing, especially given that in the other case as well, too, he allegedly strangled that person as well?
I mean, unfortunately, I have been analyzing these cases with law and crime for years, and there is usually always a pattern. And usually it escalates. And in that situation that you mentioned, where he allegedly, strangled somebody in a domestic partnership before, she didn't die, right? He strangled her, but she didn't die. And in this case, if he did the act, this strangulation did result in death. And that's not uncommon. We often see not only a pattern, but a progression as to the severity of the violence.
And do you think that Victoria Gamble was targeted while she was at the bar with this man, or do you think that this was just kind of a crime of opportunity?
That's a really great question. And it really requires being inside the mind of somebody so depraved. So I would think maybe both. How much of it was the opportunity, as you say, and also I'm sure, again, this is all alleged. She hasn't yet been convicted, but most likely he fit. I mean, she fit a type for him in order for there even to have resulted in this opportunity. But whether or not it was in the heat of the moment or completely planned, we don't know that. I'm sure that's what they're the police and prosecution are going to try to figure out themselves, because how they charge that will change. How premeditated was this? What will his defense be? Will he argue some sort of heat of the moment argument or anything like that? So more to be revealed there, but it is very difficult to get inside the mind of somebody like this and to determine, you know, whether or not she was a target from the get-go.
Yeah. And Christopher Neal, he allegedly told police and admitted to being in a woman's apartment, but said he didn't remember her name and claimed he left her alive. But then he was found in Louisiana with her car. If the case were to go to trial, do you think a jury would buy that excuse?
Well, that is going to be the difficulty for the prosecutions, because they have security footage that show them leaving the bar together. They have security footage that show him leaving her apartment. And as you say, they know he also then took her car. But what happened during that approximately 2 hours that he was inside the apartment with her is going to be the part that the prosecution has to prove. They have to prove that he did not leave her alive, essentially. And there wasn't anybody else in the apartment. The time of death may be a little bit tricky for them to figure out, but medical examiners are very good at that. But in terms of like eyewitness, her body wasn't found until much later. The interesting thing is that they did find DNA on her neck. They found two different male DNA on her neck. One of them is Christopher Neal, which certainly helps prosecution. Whether or not that second male DNA ends up being somebody that she knew, like a family member, or somehow that can maybe be explained away, let's say like a hairdresser or something, that would certainly help the prosecution. But if that can't be explained away, that's the kind of gap, let's say, in the evidence that the defense will use to say, sure, I was there, but I left her alive. That's going to be the difficult part for the prosecution.
Yeah, and it appears that this case feels kind of like a circumstantial case if you were to present it in front of a jury right now, today. What are your thoughts on how prosecutors and even the defense can kind of help connect the dots to present this type of case in front of a jury because there's so much that's kind of left in the unknown right now?
I mean, the strongest way for the prosecution to present the case is to lay out kind of what we were discussing before, that he had a domestic violence charge outstanding. He was out on bail, for allegedly trying to strangle somebody he was in a relationship with. And this crime was committed while he was out on bail. Whether or not a judge will allow them to introduce that evidence goes into how prejudicial or relevant that evidence is. That is, we call this prior bad acts. And this comes up, I'm sure, your audience knows this well because this comes up again and again and again. We don't prosecute people in this country for being bad people. You could have done bad things in your past, but that's kind of unfair to bring that up to charge you for a particular crime. The exception, of course, is if the facts match so closely to this that you aren't really proving like a propensity to commit the crime, but that you have a certain mode, your motive operandi, right? You have like an MO. It so closely matches your MO that it is more relevant than prejudicial. This very closely matches. It's another female. It's in strangulation. The timing is very close. We're talking a matter of like weeks, maybe months. It's a little bit unclear when that first alleged strangulation occurred. But wasn't something that distant past the prosecutors trying to bring in, like something that happened 5 years ago. So that's helpful to the prosecution, just how closely it matches. But you will see the defense try everything to keep that kind of evidence out, because I think if that evidence comes in, then that will be so much easier for the prosecution to prove the case, even if they have that gap in terms of not being able to prove exactly what happened in that apartment. I think they get a conviction if his prior act with the other woman comes in.
And are you surprised in the previous case that he was charged just with kind of a domestic violence offense as opposed to an attempted murder offense or even a strangulation charge as well too that allowed him to even get bail in the first place? Are you surprised that even happened?
Yes, and I think this is kind of the exact problem with violence, any acts. I mean, I've seen it so many times, violent acts against women do not get the same level of punishment as they should. And they should, because the men that do it tend to do it again and they tend to escalate. I mean, I'm frankly shocked at how little jail time somebody gets, after being convicted of rape. I personally think that should be a life sentence, and because people who rape tend to do it again and they tend to do it more violently and oftentimes they end up killing their victims. But this is not in this particular jurisdiction. It's not this jurisdiction's problem. It's a nationwide problem. I think over and over and over, we often see the sentencing, the charging for violence against women to be just frankly not enough.
Yeah. And obviously, Victoria's family is just devastated by this and believe that the justice system did fail her because he was out on bond for that domestic strangulation. What are your thoughts on just the system in a way failing Victoria in this case and other women who also, find themselves in similar circumstances?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it is really difficult. I think that part of the problem is, yes, I mean, here in this situation, maybe they didn't have enough evidence to show, to rise to a level of attempted murder, even if there was evidence. Maybe the evidence about the strangulation was a little bit weaker, and they thought they couldn't stick with the attempted murder, and they were trying to, get a conviction on a lesser charge. I mean, that is a calculation that prosecutors often make all the time. I think the problem, though, is that that it is too often seen as isolated incidents, and violence, kind of like how when people commit violence against children or sexual abuse against children, it's often repetitive. And I feel like we realize that as a society, and we tend to charge it that way. But I don't think we've come to terms with the fact that it's often repetitive against women too. And so the calculation needs to be a little bit different, and not just about maybe, can we make this particular charge stick? But maybe looking into that person's history and seeing, like, have they done this before? Most likely, that wasn't even the first time he did it before, the one that he was alleged with. There were probably other situations in the past where he's done it. We often see there's a repetitive nature when men commit violence against women.
Yeah, and just again, a heartbreaking case overall, especially knowing that Victoria Gamble was the mother of two young boys as well, too. Dina, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Before we sign you off, is there anything else you would like to add about this case overall?
No, I just think it's great to highlight it because that is how you change the conversation about how to protect women in these situations.
All right, Tina, again, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
At this time, no court date has been set in Benton County for Christopher Neal to answer to the second-degree murder charge, and it's unclear if he entered a plea in the assault or murder case. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Elizabeth Milner.